G'day and welcome to Answers News, September 27, 2018. We got Brian and myself here today. So,
how's it going?
Yeah, it's going all right, I guess. So.
Just the two of us?
Just the two of us. No, we don't.
Where's Ken?
We didn't get any plush toys for Ken or Georgia. I mean, we could have got them both at the same time.
We could have done some funny
for
stuff.
those who know that joke. But
and Dr. Georgia Purdom's not here as well.
She's not. Yep.
She's
Ken's
doing a
not.
conference.
I don't know. I think she had
Yeah.
some sort of an event, something going on this weekend.
Okay.
So,
And so
yeah,
now I'm controlling the slides, and that is dangerous. We'll see
Oh
what
boy,
happens.
I don't know what's going to happen with that. We have a live studio audience with us today. Let them hear you. They can't see you, but hey.
Hey,
All right.
very good.
Well, thank you guys.
A lot of people from Michigan. We got some Delaware. Did I hear England
Yeah.
when I came in
Yeah,
a second
someone from
ago?
England
All right,
was
very
over
good.
here, yeah.
South Carolina. Good to see everybody.
Yeah.
And we're watching you online as well, so if you start plugging in online, we'll be following your comments there as best we can. Just two guys trying to multitask, so give us some flexibility. All right, we'll try really hard. But
All right.
we got some initial announcements coming up with what we got going on. A little bit of fluff and stuff for you guys. Last Monday, Georgia caught me off guard. She said, hey, Brian, you had a special event last week, and I did. We finalized the adoption of my daughter, Macy, last Tuesday. Yeah, so good. And I had no pictures ready because she didn't tell me in advance, but I thought I'd show pictures now because I'm a proud papa. So there's our daughter, Macy Nicole Osborne. She is gorgeous. We've had her since the day after her birth, and we adopted last Tuesday officially. There's the whole family, my son Ian as well. We are just so blessed. We are loving life. She's a gorgeous little girl, and I'm biased, but I just love this picture. Love that picture, and she is beautiful, she's healthy, and we just praise God for his addition of her into our lives, and we're thankful for that. So I'm happy to share that with everybody.
All right, that's wonderful news.
That's good stuff.
So, yeah, congratulations.
That's good.
That's exciting.
And then also, I thought I'd let you talk about this. We have at the museum and the Ark Encounter happening Day Latino.
Dia Latino.
So what is that?
Yeah, Latin Day essentially is what that is. And this is going to be on the 29th, which is just this Saturday, and on the 30th, which is Sunday. The 29th at the Ark Encounter, we're going to have a bunch of different people who come in that actually help people out doing Spanish things. A lot of things are translated into Spanish. It really is a powerful day. This isn't the first time we've done this. It's kind of a yearly event where we do it. And then on the 30th here at the Creation Museum. And it really is neat. I got a chance to see Joe Owen. He's here.
Oh, yeah.
He's up for all this. Joe Owen actually heads up our office in Mexico. The Answers in Genesis
and he is
office
busy.
There. He is busy.
I think he's scheduled 2 years in advance.
Yeah, he might be.
God's doing
he's
some
busy.
amazing things in Latin America.
We have a Spanish-speaking ministry in Mexico that handles a lot of Central America. We also have one down in Peru ran by Crius Ramdath and his wife Elizabeth. And they handle a lot of things going on down in South America. But wonderful ministries, you know, we want to encourage that. But it'll be a great time to connect. If you know some Spanish-speaking people, or if you yourself are Spanish-speaking, you want to come hear things, some of the speaking in native tongue, it really is fascinating.
There's special events happening, special singers coming as well. They got stuff happening at the Ark Encounter, tour guides. I mean, it's going to be really, really good.
Yeah, it really is.
And could you tell just people about the international ministry, a little bit more about that? Because it's not just Latin America, but God's blessed AIG in multiple ways.
That's right. You know, I mean, yeah, we hit Latin America, Central America fairly well. We also have an office in Australia, and we also have one in England that handles Europe. So, I mean, we really do, you know, reach out there to a lot of areas. So, you know, we want to encourage people to connect with those ministries in their parts of the world and volunteer, help out. You can get books shipped to you a lot easier than having them shipped from the United States, I'll tell you that.
That's true.
It's a lot easier, so.
By the way, Hannah just commented on here. She said, Brian, do a good job with the slides, just like you're doing a presentation. So I'm going to try, Hannah. No pressure on that. But yeah, the international ministry is incredible. I've had the chance to go over to Africa, over to Japan, Okinawa, over to Malaysia. I'm going to New Zealand later on, and it is amazing to see what God is doing.
I've been to 4 continents.
Many different
it's
places.
Incredible,
That is awesome. And God's doing great stuff, and it's so neat to plug in with the believers in those different places for the purpose of glorifying Christ.
Yeah, it really is exciting.
Praise God for what He's doing and all that. So, ready to dive in?
Yeah, let's dive into some of these.
Got a lot of articles going on. First, we'll start with this one. Take it away.
All right. Woolly mammoths will roam new Jurassic Park-style theme park with cave lions and extinct horses in 10 years, Russian scientists say.
Now, I've got a question, though. At this new park, will the animals break loose and kill most everybody?
You know, just like the Jurassic Park movies,
I was just
right?
kind of wondering about that.
Has to be a connection there. Yeah.
Should we go to that park?
Yeah, well, they're predicting in less than 10 years, it is hoped, they say, that big cats will be released from an underground lab as part of a remarkable plan to repopulate a remote spot in Russia with Ice Age animals cloned from their preserved DNA. Now, what do you think? Do you think something like this could really happen?
There's so much to this article. I talked to Georgia about this before she left out, and she's a little skeptical whether they can actually do this.
Hey, you need to sit up straight. Your wife is watching.
Sorry, honey. But so she was skeptical. Now, it is more plausible than Jurassic Park, as we were talking earlier. With Jurassic Park, if you remember that movie, they took found dinosaur DNA and plugged it in with other DNA from like frogs or something and made their new dinosaurs. That's not, as far as we know, genetically possible.
Right.
But here, evidently, with the woolly mammoth and the older cats, they can take DNA from the permafrost they found it in and
these are basically frozen creatures.
Right, and then use that with the relatives we have today to maybe make clones today.
And see, that's one of the big differences.
Right.
A lot of people don't realize mammoths, mastodons, elephants, whether Asian or African, or
Same
even
kind.
the Nepalese, type, which have the head very similar to a mammoth, they're all part of the same kind.
Right.
Now, I know when we talk about kinds, sometimes people don't know what we mean by a kind. A kind isn't necessarily the same thing as a species.
Sure.
If things can ultimately interbreed with each other, usually they're part of the same kind.
You have like the dog kind, the elephant
That's right.
kind,
And in
so
many
forth.
cases, that's at a family level. If you guys remember order, family, genus, species.
Right.
Now, that's not always the case. In the case of elephants, it's at an order level. With humans, it's at a species level.
Sure.
You do have those particular exceptions. But what they would do then is they would use an elephant for today to work on these woolly mammoths. But, just think. If you could actually make woolly mammoths,
I feel a joke coming on.
would you use the wool? I mean, is this like sheep? I mean, do you hold them down and shear them? And how would you do that?
How do you shear a woolly mammoth?
I mean,
There's a joke in there
look at
somewhere.
the
I
size
don't
of
know
the
where it's
hair on
at,
these.
but it's in there somewhere.
Goliath could have had clothes from these things.
I bet it would not smell good. Go with that. Just throwing that out there.
But yeah, these Russians are actually working with South Korea and some Japanese scientists as well.
Which, by the way, can we say
working on
that
this.
would be really, really awesome if they could do this? Wouldn't that be neat to see
It would be
woolly
fascinating,
mammoth?
I'll say that.
Yeah, it'd be really neat to see that happen. But they got some big steps to take to get there. Even using CRISPR technology, it's still going to take some big steps
Correct.
in technology in the next 10 years. They also mentioned, a little side note here, they mentioned that along with the woolly mammoth, they'd like to bring back the woolly rhinoceros, which is really kind of a neat thing to think about because this answers...
How do you shear that one?
I don't go by the horn. I don't know what you would do there.
I don't know what you do with that.
But the relative of a woolly rhinoceros is something called the elasmotherium. Now, if you look back in history, you have...
You just
different-
scared them with a big fancy word.
I've just impressed myself by saying that word. But anyway, I didn't really. But so you have, within the rhinoceros family, you have rhinoceroses with 2 horns, bicornus, and then those with 1 horn, unicornus.
Yep, that's
and
their
so
scientific name.
the old technical language, when you said unicorn, wasn't a magical horse with a horn on it. It was a big rhinoceros with 1 major horn. So you go to the King James Bible when it says, behold the unicorn, it's actually talking about most likely something like the elasmotherium.
That's right, bringing the
relative of
Israel
woolly
out,
rhinoceros.
out of Egypt like a unicorn to get out of its way,
Well, and the
You're
reason I
charging
mention
rhino.
and I mention that because so often skeptics will quote that verse in the King James Bible and scoff at the Bible. Look, your Bible teaches about unicorns. It's a book of fairy tales.
Right.
No, actually, it's very accurate. The unicorn was a single-horned animal, probably
That's
the
right.
elasmotherium.
Yeah.
But little side note.
Yeah, fascinating little things. Well, it's tough for us to find an article that has nothing to do with, say, climate change nowadays.
Oh, you
Does this article have anything to do with climate change?
I about
O'Brien?
forgot. I'm glad you mentioned that. So
Yeah.
you want to say it? You go ahead. You brought it up.
Well, here's what's interesting. Apparently, in some of these areas where there's permafrost in Russia, what they're finding is that it's starting to kind of dome up, as some things are starting to melt off a little bit.
Sure.
And so they're like, oh, well, what is this? Well, guess what? It's giving off all this methane that had been stored up under the ground. So they're worried about the methane with regards to climate change. And so why do they want to clone these animals? Well, so they can turn them loose up there so they'll pack it back down so it'll keep the greenhouse gases from going up into the atmosphere.
So the hope is to clone the woolly mammoth, to reintroduce it back to the environment there over in the tundra, right, over in that area, to pack down the ice to save the world from climate change. Did I get that right?
That's basically what they're saying. Now, see, I just say, okay, you got all this methane given off. Why not go out and harvest it? I mean, people pay good money for that.
Yeah. Which, by the way,
I don't
Bodie, we need to be fair to these guys. They're being consistent with their worldview. Climate change is a big thing in the secular worldview. When they're understanding of the past, they think it's going to be a big climate change in the
And
future.
let's face it, climates have changed. I mean, we've
They have,
recognized it. We had a
absolutely.
global flood. I mean, come on.
That wrecked the world, right?
Yeah.
And so they're being consistent with their worldview. We would just say their worldview, their starting assumptions are faulty. That's why their conclusions are so wrong.
Yeah.
Smart guys, but just wrong
All right.
assumptions.
Well, let's move on to the next one here.
Yep.
Artificial genes show life does not have to be based on DNA.
Which is a pretty fantastic title. What's the actual meat of the article?
Well, yeah, but you know what? As a Christian, I could tell you life isn't based on DNA. God is life. God doesn't have DNA. They're spiritual beings. Think of angels and things like that. You know, they have life and they don't have DNA. Now, of course, they're not looking at it from this perspective, not at all.
Right.
What they're doing is they're actually looking at DNA saying, hey, let's go in and manipulate the DNA, kind of change up, some of these base pairs that we have.
Yeah.
You got 4 basic base pairs. You got what? Adenine, guanine, thymine, and cytosine, and they bond together. What they're doing is they're actually getting some longer and different chains to get in there and go in and replace and
they
do
created
bonds.
fat and skinny DNA,
Fat and skinny DNA.
which sounds sort of, I don't know.
I don't know. Is that shaming the DNA?
I think
in
it's
our
fat shaming DNA.
our
I'm not sure how
culture?
that works, but anyway.
Poor DNA. But yeah, really, that's what they're doing. And they were actually fascinated because it actually still worked and kind of corrected itself.
Yeah.
On a particular instance. And I thought, well, that's fascinating. What they say here is, nevertheless, they all performed DNA's crucial functions. Its base pairs basically corrected itself when it realized it wasn't.
So what we
matching
really saw
properly.
was the fact you can monkey around with what God created, the DNA, and it still corrects itself. It still works.
Right.
Even after we mess
basically
with it.
ejected and replaced it with the other. Now,
kinda what we
that's
saw.
with regards to that particular function. That doesn't necessarily mean
Sure.
for coding and systems like that it would actually work right. But yeah, and this isn't the first time people have done this sort of thing. They tried to go in and modify DNA and that sort of thing. Of course, from a moral perspective, from a Christian perspective, we do need to be careful about modifying human DNA and things like that. I mean, I think there's a moral element behind all that, but with
Because
regards
we
to
don't
this, I
quite
think it's
understand the
fascinating.
ramifications of monkeying with the DNA, correct?
That's right.
Multiple generations down the road.
And that's one of the issues.
That's one of the big issues with even CRISPR, correct?
Right.
Um,
At the end of this article, though,
This
he
was
says,
interesting, yeah.
But he suspects it's simply an accident of chemistry that our DNA turned out the way DNA essentially turned out to be.
Which is a really good guess based on his worldview, but totally arbitrary and not
That's right.
scientific, right?
That's right. It's just an opinion.
And it's just an opinion
I mean,
based on his worldview.
we look at DNA. It is fascinating. Like, let's say we received a signal from space that had just a little bit of coded information in it. People would be like, look, there's aliens. Oh, my, look, there's intelligence
Exactly
behind
right.
it. We look at the DNA, which is incredibly complex.
It's more complex than anything we can make,
Yes.
correct?
It is a code system that is compact. It is incredible.
Yeah.
And people look at it, no, that was all natural causes. No.
Which, by the way,
it's a double standard.
It shows the heart of the matter. That it's not a matter of intellect, it's a matter of suppressing the truth in unrighteousness, really is what it is.
Yeah.
It's clear from creation, it's clear from DNA. There's a creator, there's a God who wrote the code system.
Hey, did you notice?
Yeah.
I've got a new mug today.
You got mugged.
And you've got a new mug today, too.
I do. You know what? I forgot to mention
I don't
that.
know if people see, a lot of people are pretty
true.
familiar with the news. They know I have a mug that I typically use.
Is
It's
this going to be a
dinosaur mug.
shameless plug?
I've
I've got
I
a
don't
feeling
know,
it's going to
but
be a shameless plug.
we've got some brand new mugs coming out.
We do have a new
here
brand
at the
new.
museum and at the Ark, and I saw this one. It's got the dragon legends, the connection between dinosaurs and dragons, that sort of thing. And I'm like, oh, I've got to get this mug. So
That's got a cool medieval look to it. It really
yeah.
does.
So I was chatting with one of my bosses, and I was like, hey, can I use that in Answers News? He's like, go for it. And I noticed you eyeing that one, so I brought that one down for you.
Who's heard of the Lost Squadron before? Heard of
You
the
guys
Lost
ever heard of the
Squadron?
Lost Squadron?
The planes that went down in
World War II, yeah.
World War II, right? What
In
was it?
Greenland,
right? Over in Greenland. Actually, the details are on the mug. So if you get the mug, you get good
You can find out
apologetics
about
with
it.
this particular mug. It's pretty neat.
Yeah.
But it used to be suggested it took long periods of time to lay down all the snow and ice we find in those
Right,
areas.
yeah. You look at the
Right.
Arctic ice sheet, you look at the Greenland ice sheet, and they would say, yeah, each one of these layers you see in here are an annual layer. Have you guys
Right.
ever heard things like that? And they say you add up the layers, look, it goes back hundreds of thousands of years. Well, the problem is, they knew right where they landed this squadron. They went back, they couldn't find it. Lo and behold, they've been
Just
able
50
to
years
find
later.
now. They found 2 now.
Okay.
Glacier
Really?
Girl is one of them. They just found one here not too long ago.
missed that.
And
Okay.
it was under 250 feet of ice layers. And this is less than 50 years.
In less than 50 years. So those are not annual layers.
Those are not annual layers.
Right.
So what it is multiple layers, even sometimes within a same storm.
Sure.
So it's just fascinating.
So you can get a good, pretty mug with good apologetics all at one time.
I thought it was really neat. If you look at the handle on that one, it's got the ice layers on the handle, and then they got the plane at the bottom.
There's a plane at the bottom.
It's pretty cool. So.
Which is pretty nifty. Yeah.
See, mine has some teaching too, but you have to look at the bottom of it. So you have to be really careful, otherwise you're liable to pour your coffee on yourself.
And then actually the planes kind of pop off the mug here. That's pretty neat as well.
Yep.
We probably spent way too much time on these mugs. But
we
anyway,
spent too much time on mugs.
They are pretty neat.
All right, Honeybee.
By the way, can I just say this real quick
Sure,
before we dive into this next one? First,
okay.
Thank you, Hannah, for your encouragement. She says I'm doing a good job multitasking the slides and the talking. I'm trying really hard. But someone made a really good point about the mammoths a second ago, how they're trying to use these, these cloned mammoths to save the world. They made the point that mammoths will release much more methane than they prevent.
Oh, no, they're going to design these not to give off any methane, I'm sure.
That's a valid point, all right? Just throwing that out there. You got to take that in consideration.
That's right. I mean, people are attacking
give and
cows
take
for their methane.
with the methane there with the mammoths.
To go along with that, I mean, we do have a book here, Frozen in Time. This is by Mike Ord. He's a meteorologist, retired, and he really loves to study subjects like the Ice Age. And he wrote a book on Frozen in Time. It looks at the Ice Age, looks at mammoths, a lot of the different issues behind that. It's actually an easy to read book. It's a great book, so I want to encourage people to dive into that. It's not a mammoth read, if you guys are wondering.
It won't go extinct.
That's right. Yeah. All right, next article here. Honeybee swarms act like superorganisms to stay together in high winds. This is kind of fascinating, actually.
Really was. Really neat to kind of read about this particular article.
Yeah, you might want to flip the slide, though, so people can,
well,
can see that.
Oh, yeah, there I was doing so good. I got distracted.
So good.
Hey, I got distracted by someone noticed on the feed here that our feed got interrupted on the live stream. That's okay. The whole thing is recorded. You can catch the rest later on if we miss something during the live stream, just so you know.
Okay.
So what's going on here, Bodie?
Okay, so we got honeybee swarms. I don't know if anybody has ever seen this. We used to have some honeybees on the farm that I grew up on, and they're fascinating. But once in a while, they'll swarm. You have a queen go out, they'll protect the queen, and they'll go swarm while some of the drones are out looking for where they're going to re-nest.
Right.
And it's fascinating. They've done studies on this because it kind of, when they sit there hanging off of a branch, they kind of look like it's like a upside down or like a teardrop or a cone or something like that. But apparently in high winds or vibration, they actually change shapes to accommodate and meet the needs.
And they call it a superorganism, more or less. They're all working together
as one
unit.
As one. It's fascinating the way that these things will do that. Ants have been known to do that sort of thing too, with regards to dealing with water and making rafts and stuff like that. But they actually put these in a laboratory, and you can watch a video on these things, but they actually started to vibrate things and shoot wind at it and stuff like that to see how they actually...
And the whole swarm would change shape to best deal with the incoming pressure, right? From the winds or the shaking of the branch. Really neat to see.
Yeah, it really is.
And of course, they're trying to figure out, how do the bees know how to do this? Where did the instincts come from to do all of this, especially as one superorganism?
They didn't learn it from experience because these bees, they don't live long enough to experience all these types of things, so it's ingrained in them. It's a pretty powerful piece of design, I think.
And so it really is fantastic evidence of a creator who put that information in them for the instincts.
Yeah.
I need to see that. And moving on to something also pretty neat we talked about earlier. This was, well, you take it away. What's going on here?
This experiment will shoot ghostly particles through Earth. Answer why we exist. So,
wow.
That's pretty fancy title, right?
That's a pretty grand claim. It'll answer the question why we exist. So does it?
You know why we exist? To give glory to God.
I'd say amen to that. Thought you were going to say a joke for a second. I was a little hesitant. Is this set up for a joke
or a
real theological point? Amen.
But it's interesting. Out in the secular world, when people reject God and His Word, they're left with a worldview that nature is all that there is.
Yep.
And so they really look for hope. They really look for purpose because they're not looking to God. They don't realize the importance of man being made in the image of God, for example.
And they still have those same desires that every other person does because we're made in God's image and we're broken because of sin.
Well, according to Romans 1, they know God exists.
Right.
The problem is they're trying to suppress that, and so they're reaching out to anything else. And in this instance, they're trying to figure out, well, why do we exist? Well, let's go shoot some particles through the earth and find out.
How's that going to work out for them?
Okay, now, from a big picture, I think the research is fascinating. What they're going to do, they're going to take some neutrinos. Neutrinos are very small particles. We have 3 different types of them, muon, tau, and then electron neutrinos.
Right.
And what they'll do is they'll shoot those things through the Earth. Now, neutrinos are zipping through all the time because we actually see neutrinos coming out of the sun.
Yeah.
And so it just all the time anyway.
Right.
But they're so small they can actually pass through matter. And so what they're going to do is they want to shoot these through the Earth and have them detected on the other side of the Earth.
Which is neat.
It
That's
is.
a
It's
really
fascinating.
Very cool experiment.
And so, you know, it's massively expensive. This is called the Dune experiment. And I know there's TV shows and movies like Dune, you know, and people think, oh, wow, look at the sci-fi.
Sure.
But this is an actual project that's out there. And there's a couple of different labs, one in Chicago and one in San Diego, that they're actually working with this with some of these labs to shoot this stuff through the Earth.
And I wanted to mention, too, here at the very beginning, we both mentioned this earlier on, their hope in this particular experiment. You look at the second paragraph in the article, they say, well, move over philosophy, because typically philosophy answers where we came from, why we're here, the meaning for life. Move over philosophy because science has made a crucial step in building the equipment that will help us answer these questions. So again, as you mentioned earlier, they are trying in any way, shape, or form to try to find these crucial answers to these big picture
Yeah, they
life
want to know, how
questions.
did the universe come into existence? You know,
But-
why is the universe the way it is? And why is there something instead of nothing?
But notice, move over science, move over philosophy, move over religious thinking, move over those sorts of things. Science is here to save the day. Science can explain everything, is what they're trying to say.
And you know
here.
what? I think the research is fascinating, but is it really going to answer those questions?
And what are they really trying to answer?
It's really not.
So we looked at this earlier. They're really trying to answer a fundamental question, which is why in the universe do we see matter and very little antimatter? So as the
Right.
neutrinos go through space-time, actually according to the Big Bang theory, after the Big Bang, there's tons of energy that converted into matter. But when energy converts into matter, it creates both equal amounts of matter and antimatter. So if the Big Bang were true, then we should expect to see equal amounts in the universe of matter and antimatter.
And do we find that?
We find the exact opposite.
We find matter.
We find matter with
And that's
very
always
little
been a big problem.
antimatter. Yep.
That's one of the many problems.
And that's
with
what they're
the Big
trying to
Bang
answer
model.
ultimately in this particular experiment.
Right. They're
correct?
trying to say, well, where's the antimatter?
So what they're trying to do is to explain the Big Bang, to verify the Big Bang, and then in their minds, the Big Bang verifies or answers the questions
Yeah.
about why we are here, where we came from, so forth.
Now,
and
see,
so
to
on.
me,
that's the hope.
The prediction of Big Bang was to have equal amounts of both, and yet we don't have that. That's a
don't.
false prediction.
That's a failed prediction.
Now, usually in science, when something
Does that
has
mean it's a big
has a
dud?
false prediction, boom, you throw it out.
Throw it out.
And I know there's a lot of scientists that have really been backing off of Big Bang. But a lot of people still want to hold on to it because really that's the only type of alternative that people have to a Christian worldview where God created all things. Now, is that too hard for an all-powerful God? No, it's all too easy.
Yeah.
But see,
Amen.
when you don't want God, you have to cling to models even if they're not the best. So,
But anyway, a fascinating
Yeah.
article, a fascinating experiment. They're supposed to do the experiment starting in
Right.
2026.
yes. And
So 10 years.
It's interesting.
Well, less than
they're
10
hoping
years.
here,
8
you know,
years.
when they look at the research. In short, it might explain why we exist at all. But really,
It
the
won't.
research isn't going to explain it.
Won't do that at
People
all.
are going to try to come up with ideas and models. We have to understand where that
I
comes
think I
from.
recognize too, as we talk
right.
about all this, science doesn't say anything. Scientists speak based
That's
on the
right.
interpretation of data
Right.
based on their worldview. That's an important principle to keep in mind. Moving on to this
All
one,
right.
this was a fun one.
How dragonfly wings get their patterns. All right.
And then the subtitle, New Model Sheds Light on How Nature Generates Diverse Patterns. Now, buddy, does nature generate anything?
Nature does not generate anything. Nature is a concept of all that exists. So this is actually a
Right.
reification fallacy.
Yeah.
So we have to be very careful of those things. But you see it in the title. you
Yeah.
know,
And the article is
is.
really, really neat. It's talking about the wings of dragonflies
Yeah.
and other insects.
which
and
are
how
fascinating.
It's very neat because each wing, according to this article, is unique like a fingerprint.
They're all different.
Based on the veins in the wings of these
Right.
insects.
You know.
Really, really neat stuff.
Yeah, so just go out there and catch yourself a dragonfly and look at it. You got to be good to catch
If
those
you do, let us
dragonflies,
know.
I'll say
That's
that.
really hard to do.
But yeah, they're looking at it, you know, and if you zoom up, you see the patterns are fascinating and they're all unique and they're all different. And they're trying to figure out why. Well, there's a lot in this article, but they really don't get to the meat and potatoes till almost the end of the
Very
article.
end, right.
And here's what they say. I'm going to read it. This is one of their paragraphs. They say the researchers proposed that an unknown inhibitory signal diffuses from multiple signaling centers in the regions between the primary veins. These inhibitory zones emerge randomly and repel one another and then prevent secondary veins from growing in certain areas. As the wing grows and stretches during development, those zones could form the complex geometries of the wing as the veins grew around them. Put that in plain English.
Translation, we think this might be maybe how it could have possibly happened, but we don't know. But maybe.
Right.
Is that about it?
From some unknown signals.
And, you
Some
know,
unknown signals cause something that makes this random.
that's pretty
That's
deep.
it in a
That's pretty
nutshell.
deep, Bodie. I don't know where to go with that.
But there's some awful fancy words behind all that. Sometimes you just have to read, what exactly is this stating?
Well, and that's why it's a really good principle to keep in mind, dear Christian. As you read titles to any of these sorts of articles, it gives you a pretty bold prediction how this happened. We know how this happened. Predicts, how the dragonfly wings get their patterns. New model sheds light on how nature did it. Read the article, and it's pretty much,
They
we
really
don't know,
know.
maybe, possibly. I think this is a good guess based on our worldview.
There's still more questions to ask than answers in that one. But all right.
This was pretty neat.
Royal Ontario Museum to display newly discovered dinosaur Zool.
Zool. Now, that may sound familiar to some of you if you remember the old. Thank you very much. Somebody from the audience just helped me with the slides. Audience participation. Thank you. So there we go. So there we go. Zool. Thank you.
There you go.
So if you recognize the name Zool, this should ring a bell from an old movie called Ghostbusters. You might remember Ghostbusters back in the day, if you've seen that.
They don't want to raise their hands, I can tell.
I saw a few of those.
Yeah, out in the audience, people are like, yeah.
Yeah, but who was Zool? Do you remember in the movie?
Yeah, Zool was one of the characters
Like
on
the
there.
pagan deity,
The bad guy,
the
basically.
bad guy, yeah, more or less.
And so they named it Zool, Destroyer of Shins.
Which could be terrible. But
Yeah,
there's a picture
take a look
of
at this
Zool.
thing, yeah, and of course the tail's
You
kind of
can't see
cut
the
off on the
club tail in
image,
that
but
picture.
that thing's supposed to go around and hit things in the shins. I call my kids destroyers of shins. They are so good, and they don't need a tail. They've whacked my shin so many times. Oh.
We had a Great Dane for a while. Great Danes are really big dogs, really big tails, and we kept Samson in the house for quite a while, and his tail was the destroyer of all sorts of things. He'd walk by, knock off lamps and glasses and cups, and it hurt if it hit you in the shin too.
Yeah.
But this is a variation of the ankylosaurus,
Yes,
correct?
Ankylosaurus.
Okay.
And it was found nearly complete. I don't think there was a part that wasn't found. Now, part of it's still encased in rock that they're working on.
That's
getting it
normal,
out.
right?
What's that?
That's normal,
That's
right?
actually very rare.
Yes, exactly.
Most of the bones that we find are a single bone or
That's right.
disarticulated. It's very rare for us to find a whole bunch of bones there together.
And that's why they're so excited about it.
You find 40% of, say, a dinosaur. People get really excited about it. This is a complete thing here. And it was very well preserved. You can see the skin on this thing. And, we've reported
soft
on
tissue
this
was preserved as well.
Some soft tissue as well. It was scaly.
By the way, real quick, we skipped over this, but the article says this remnant is 76 million years old, and we still have soft tissue intact.
Yeah. I tell you what, it's 76 million years. We call that imaginary time.
Correct.
This thing was buried in flood sediment. That's what it is. So you'd think back to the time of the flood. Noah was alive when this thing was getting buried.
Well, because you got to bury something deeply and quickly to protect it from scavengers and decomposition, which requires a rapid burial, which would happen at the time of the flood.
That's right, and they would admit that. That thing was buried. In
they mentioned that later on in the article. It was
It's
buried quickly.
Yeah. But they even found fossilized skin and things like that. It was a scaly creature, no feathers.
What?
No feathers.
Oh, come on now.
Now, you look at this ankylosaurus, and this creature is actually one of the bird-hipped dinosaurs. Now, for those of you who don't know, dinosaurs are defined by having one of two hip structures, lizard-hipped or bird-hipped. This is one that has a bird hip. So does the stegosaur.
Is one more hip than the other?
Triceratops. But it's not exactly like a bird hip, but it is. It's got similarities to a bird hip.
Right.
But you might think, out in the world, there are people who talk about dinosaurs evolving into birds. You might think, the bird-hipped ones evolved into the bird. No. That's actually wrong.
No, the lizard hip.
They say the lizard-hip ones evolved into birds.
The bird hip. Are you confused yet?
Yeah, it really does confuse. Yeah,
right,
but these are like the theropods. Think of like a velociraptor.
Yeah.
Things like that is what they were shooting to evolve
Those are the
into
lizard
birds.
hips, correct?
The lizard hip.
Yeah. So
now, never mind the fact that they found a lot of birds buried in the same rock layers as dinosaurs.
or even supposedly older than dinosaurs.
Yeah, in many cases. Yeah. So they say those birds went extinct, but then the lizard hip dinosaurs evolved into birds. It's fascinating.
Well, and again, it kind of shows the lengths you go to try to explain away the evidence to make it fit your worldview.
Yeah.
And again, I'll say these people are bright people. They're very, very smart, especially in their fields, but they have the wrong assumptions about the past, therefore they're reaching the wrong conclusions in the present.
Yeah.
And that's basically what's happening there. But it's a great find. It shows you the pattern of the skin. It's just a wonderful fossil remnant.
Great find.
Good
I
stuff.
want to see this thing in a museum someday. I think it'd
have to go to Canada,
really
right?
awesome.
That's where it's gonna be at.
On display there for everyone to follow after.
But a great transition from that to this next article. No transition at all. And I remembered the slide. I'm so proud. All right.
California school districts' less sexist dress code draws mixed reviews. So what's going on here at this school?
So, well, I was a teacher for 13 years in the public schools, and we changed dress codes a couple of different times during my tenure, and it usually was a big deal because people had very big opinions about what was right or what was wrong within those particular, their own viewpoint about dress codes. But basically what happened here is that this school has changed their dress code to basically be this. You can wear anything you want as long as it covers up the basics. And you got a shirt, shoes, and shorts.
You know, it's interesting. On my printed copy of this, you guys may not be able to see it, but there's an advertisement with a guy without a shirt on. I thought, really?
But
what
they
are
can
the
wear,
odds of that?
Yeah, they changed it so
right
girls
there?
can wear tank tops, spaghetti straps, mini skirts, short shorts.
Right, and basically what they
you can
were
wear
saying,
pajamas. That's fine too if you want to. No
they
big
looked at
deal.
the dress code and they said, well, this is kind of like defining what a woman should wear. And they're like, we don't want to be sexist. So they just wanted to kind of do away with a lot of that stuff. Now, here's the thing. Let's look at big picture worldviews. You got, say, an evolutionary worldview. You got a creationist worldview. Okay, from an evolutionary perspective, we're all just rearranged atoms. And we all just evolved from animals. We're just animals. Why are you wearing clothes?
Why wear clothes at all?
Why wear anything?
The animals don't wear clothes.
Why not be cannibals or rape or murder? So, I mean, those things happen all the time out in nature.
Sure.
I mean, I hate to say it that way, but that's really what that worldview teaches.
It does.
Now, you come over to a creationist worldview. We're made in the image of God. We should be having respect for other people, therefore, because they're made in the image of God, because other people have value. The Bible tells us to wear respectable attire, to be modest, not to cause somebody else to lust. You should be looking at that from a biblical viewpoint, make sense of clothing. You know, we wear clothes because Adam and Eve sinned against God. God cursed the ground, cursed the animals, sentenced man to die. The world went from a perfect world to an imperfect world, and we end up wearing clothes as a result because the Lord sacrificed animals and gave us proper clothes to wear because of a sin-cursed and broken world now. So that's why we wear clothes. It comes out of a biblical worldview.
And without that biblical worldview, where do you draw the lines? Why draw the line at a miniskirt? Why draw the line at no vulgar images?
Not just here, but at
It's
other
arbitrary.
places. Yeah,
Right?
it is.
Oh,
It's purely arbitrary. People are like, well, okay, we don't have a guideline, so let's just pick whatever we want. Maybe we can do this, maybe we can do that. Oh, maybe we'll change it. I'll tell you what, they're all over the place on there.
It's also interesting as you look at this particular article, the goal of this particular change in the dress code for this school was to be, in their words, less sexist. Don't focus on the girls so much, so the girls have more freedom to wear what they want to wear. But here's my question. I thought in our modern day culture, within secular thinking, there were no genders. I thought,
notice how that's going around.
right? So how do you deal with that? So there's actually biologically,
you are whatever you feel like.
You are what you feel like. So
and
how can you even say you're
different
being less
genders and
sexist towards these biological people if they're not actually a boy or a girl?
See, they're being
they're whatever they want to
inconsistent.
be.
Yeah.
And you can't be consistent within that worldview. The best you can be within the secular worldviews, you can be consistently inconsistent. And that's what happens time and again based on that worldview.
You know, they're talking about, what this kind of stuff leads to. And there's a brilliant quote in here. They say, kids are starting everything younger. And I'm like, well, that's because you're throwing it in their faces. And you know what? We're seeing that at younger and younger ages. Kids are being drilled with a secular worldview and secular morality. And so we need to be praying for the kids of the next generation.
And there are consequences to these worldviews and to how you implement them in your culture around you. There are consequences to that. And we mention this stuff because we care for the coming generations. Do we have time for one more? We got to wrap it up.
We're actually over time.
Overtime.
So we're going to have to cut it off there, I think.
Some good articles left, but hey, be back on Monday. Will Ken be back Monday? I believe he is.
I really don't know, but I know we have the news items picked out. What we didn't hit,
You'll be here,
hit
right?
on Monday.
I'll be out of town.
I think I'll be here.
Are you here by yourself? It could be.
I'll find out.
It could be the Bodie show.
I'm telling you, I will look at my phone and it will tell me magically. But yeah, we are officially out of time. Hopefully you enjoyed the show today.
Yep.
And God bless you all.
Guys, have a great day.
Yeah.